Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of Fridays with Phil. I'm your host, Philip W. Dunn, Program Manager here at USBC. On behalf of our President, Ron Busby, our board and our staff, I want to thank you all for registering to attend and for your continued support of USBC. Now, before we begin our program, I want to remind you to continue to register for our webinars at usblackchambers.org/webinars. I also want you to be sure to register your business at buyblack.us. This is very, very important. Now, today I have the esteemed honor and the privilege to host this very special guest. Her name is Sidni L Shorter, the president and CEO of the Utah Black Chamber of Commerce, and she's a fierce advocate and practitioner of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sidni is the CEO of Execute Now, which is a client-focused finance and accounting firm with a mission to ensure nonprofits and small to mid-sized organizations that they have affordable access to capital, prudent financial management, and forward-thinking leadership. And I'm very excited to have her here today.
I am great. Thank you, Phil. Thank you so much for having me. It is my honor and pleasure to be here to speak with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I wonder if we can get started. I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your business and how you came to be at Utah Black Chamber of Commerce.
Well, I'll make that story very short, but what I appreciate and I share often is that I have real business most of my life. I come from a family of educators and entrepreneurs and was given the task at 7 years old to manage an aspect of the business that was my responsibility totally. And so, of course, as a youth, not understanding where that could lead me, and I can put those things in perspective and understand how that exposure and having the opportunity to see two very strong business women become very successful in an industry that women really did not exist. And so that really empowered me to really step into my authentic self. And becoming an entrepreneur, I've always approached my work from a position of I own it. And so that was kind of an easy transition for me. But I had an opportunity to engage Execute Now. I was a client of Execute Now. And I saw the impact of the work that they were doing for nonprofit and mid to small size businesses with their business model to ensure that all businesses could afford to have the accurate, the legal, and most prudent financial infrastructure, because we find that most small businesses, and especially Black businesses, that's where we are challenged. And it's not due to a lack of education. It's the challenge of many other businesses, because as entrepreneurs, we are not professional accountants, CPAs, or bookkeepers. We know the nature of the business that we are actually performing. But most often, Black businesses cannot afford that capacity. And Execute Now created an affordable model for these businesses. And I utilized Execute Now to deploy some work in the state of Louisiana around affordable housing. And the founder and CEO of Execute Now put the business up for sale with a broker in New York. And we had a conversation. I found out about it. And I told my husband, I said, I think this is a great opportunity, and circled back with that CEO and founder. And she shared with me that 80% of the portfolio of Execute Now, I had referred to Execute Now. Because I was that passionate about what they could do, and I saw the benefit, and I saw companies really scale and generate their revenue and attract funding. That was what was most important for me, is that they were able to position themselves to attract funding, but they were in a financially healthy and competitive state once Execute Now engaged them. And so I made that acquisition. And changed the model just a bit and went to a full-on consultancy model where I engaged consultants around the country. So I used to tell them all the time, I really was just their headhunter.
Right.
And so I really look for those opportunities where I could align that professional capacity with those organizations that needed that. One of the things that really got me exposed here in Utah is that I got very heavily involved in social impact investment, because the landscape of philanthropy had changed and nonprofits needed to really begin to educate themselves to understand what debt looked like and what investment looked like and how to have those conversations, because quite frankly, investors don't care about your narrative.
Right.
They appreciate that you're doing great work and you're making an impact in communities, but they also want to know, well, how am I going to get my money back? Right. And so wrote a national program called Pitch and Position that we deployed to organizations around the country. And we really saw the impact to those organizations where they were now understanding how to mine for investors in their own communities, how to speak their language, how to now translate their business and understand it from a revenue generating standpoint, because nonprofits typically don't think in that manner. And really understanding what is my value proposition and understanding that I can take on a bit of debt and really move my program forward and have a greater impact in my community. And so that is how I ended up getting connected to the Black Chamber through the book called Black Utah. The founder of the chamber wrote a book called Black Utah. And one of my colleagues here had mentioned about the Black Chamber, and I just became very curious. And so we connected on LinkedIn. I have to give that great plug to LinkedIn, and started a conversation there. And it led to me taking on the role here in Utah as president and CEO of the Black Chamber. But I was just very impressed with the work that the founder, James Jackson, was able to accomplish here, because we look at Utah through the lens of there's a lack of diversity.
Right.
And although that is true, the impact of the diverse cultures here, the cooperation, the allies, the partners that are here really are moving the needle. We have a ways to go and there's work to be done, but I saw accomplishments of a chamber in a place where the landscape, that there was an absence of a true community to tap into, to really build upon. But although low in number, the strength to build the foundation for what's happening here in Utah for the Black community, the Black business community, was absolutely phenomenal and very attractive to me. And so I was really honored that they would even consider me. And quite frankly, I had been readying my company for an exit at some point, considering, what's my encore, what will I do next? And of course, it had to align with, who I am, my values. And I have always been very passionate about small businesses and Black businesses. And so this absolutely aligned. And so I'm just really honored and blessed to be here to carry out the mission of the Black Chamber here.
Now, very awesome journey, very powerful journey. You started, sort of pitching in at 7 years old. Fast forward many years later, and you get the attention of this business that is doing some great work in the community. And not only that, but you're so passionate about the business that 80% of the people that are getting the services from this business have come from your referrals. And so now there's an opportunity to purchase this business, and you snap it right up, and then you begin to lead this business. Not only that, you're connected with the Utah Black Chamber, later assuming the role as president of the Utah Black Chamber in what's considered a state that doesn't have a ton of diversity, but you're still leading and thriving. So very, very powerful journey. And then I should also add, we see the doctorate. So you are Dr. Shorter
Yes.
as well. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I am a strong woman of faith, and I say this unabashedly. That is how I move. I share often that my work for me is both mission and ministry, and that's how I approach it. I've always been a servant leader before I could identify it and put a tag or a title on that. And so I just believe that, I truly work for who I serve, right? I would even tell my consultants that I exist because of you. And so from an educational standpoint, well, I always had an interest, a greater interest in learning more about, religion, spirituality, but had no interest in being a pastor, right?
Right.
And the only path to learning more was to go to a seminary and, do all of these things around becoming a pastor and, that type of thing. And I had no interest in that. And came upon a program, one of the best in the country that I had been looking at, but it required you to be there, was Moody. Many people know about, many people know about that program. And I traversed that path, but I just could not break away from anything to spend time on their campus, and came across this program with Hope Institute. And there was this opportunity to truly further my education, around theology. But what's very interesting program that I didn't really know I was signing up for is that your degree is tied to your license as a Christian therapist. And so on the educational side, there is an evaluation, and you present your thesis, you go through that process with the board there. But then your thesis is to the licensing board, and the licensing board has to approve it. And so if the licensing board does not approve, I get the degree. And
Right.
so, in when I reflect on it now, I have an appreciation for it. Because it's a PsyD. It's not a PhD. So this was not theory. This is practical.
Right.
And what that meant is that upon conferring that degree, I can truly now go into counseling sessions. I'm a licensed Christian therapist. And so, I now have an appreciation, great appreciation. It was hard work.
No, and it sounds like it was, and it sounds like you were up for it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about your faith here towards the end of the conversation. I wanted to dig into the work that you did for your doctorate. I want to dig into the work that you did for your business and the chamber. So for those folks that are watching this right now, I wonder if you could share with us 3 pieces of advice that you would give to someone who wants to become an entrepreneur.
The first thing I'd like to say when posting is understanding your why. Beyond generating revenue, beyond understanding this is my passion or my gift. What is your why? And of course, that is my position because I am a servant leader. It is, how can I make an impact? What's going to be different because I was there? What is going to be better? We oftentimes, we have services and things like that. And I love what I'm seeing with this younger generation who what I call, wrap a culture around a product, right? And so you can it's tangible now that I sold you a pair of jeans. I mean, there's a website that I shop on that literally gives you these quotes of motivation and encouragement, because that's a part of who they are. So they understand why they are doing this. And so I just believe that that is critically important, because their motivation is I consider that an emotion, right?
Yes.
But when you're in business and you are an entrepreneur, being driven by emotion is not what's going to lead you to success. And most often, what I love about the entrepreneurs and their brains, true entrepreneurs, they keep going.
Yes.
And there's a shift. Something happens with that motivation, and it becomes determination, or it becomes a duty. But that only happens as we either start with understanding our why, or we go far enough to begin to understand our why. So that's really the first aspect of it, is just really I taking the time to understand your why.
Mm-hmm. So that's the big key. Understand your why, and then like you said, it's also a part of it wrapped in that vision too. Sometimes we have a vision that may not be clear in the beginning, but the closer we get to the why, the clearer the vision becomes.
Absolutely.
And so then it sort of helps you with understanding the why, and then that's what keeps you going.
Yes.
Right? Is knowing that, hey, there's something more. It's me. There's something more powerful at play here. So I'm glad to hear that. So then beyond, understanding the why, I wonder if you could also share with us, some of the skills or the mindsets that entrepreneurs need in order to be successful.
Yeah, the mindset, I say, for, it's really having, and I age myself when I say this, having that sense of duty.
Yes.
Because oftentimes, and although many Black businesses and entrepreneurs are solopreneurs, but we may not consider ourselves that we employees, right? So it's just me and the business. If you're providing a service or product, even if you are a caterer, those resources you are spending with your vendors, there's a dependency on you to be in business. So I consider that almost like an employee.
Yes.
And so from that sense of duty, I have to keep going. I have to continue. I have my family to feed. I have my overhead. I have my bills. But there are other things that depend on you. And what I call that is the economic ecosystem. And we have to understand that we are all looking to be a vital part of that. And many of our barriers and many of the issues that we find ourselves in as Black businesses, we end up costing that system something. And so that's why I'm a huge advocate on, the affordability of capital, having access to information, understanding where dollars and opportunities are, because that ensures that we are a vital part of the economic ecosystem. Because when those barriers are there, it puts us in positions where we cost the system something. And when we all do well, it's like that rising tide. When the water, all the boats on the water will rise, right?
Ships rise, that's right.
And so, having that sense of duty in under your why, to me, really, that's where you begin to see businesses that they're those that will rise, there will though, and everyone has issues and challenges. But how do you address them? How do you equip yourself? How do you continue to learn? How do you really seek solutions that get you toward what your goal and your vision is? And I think a lot of times that sense of duty, so, there's your why, understanding that, and then that sense of duty, that really is what generates your energy around moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's so incredibly important when I think about our community, is we do have an interdependency on one another. And there was a time in history where we could only depend on one another. And so we were able
Absolutely.
to, our businesses were able to flourish and we're able to do well. And so I think we need to return to that level of thought where we can depend on each other. We do have a duty to support one another and bring each other into the fold because you are right. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so when one of us does well, it creates that spirit in which all of us can do well. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad to hear that duty is one of those mindsets that we need to start adopting and then understanding the why as well. So I definitely appreciate that.
So my third really is around value and understanding your value, but first standing your value as a person,
Mhm.
just as who you are. As I said, it took me a moment to really understand that I was a servant leader, right? But then understanding that, wow, I've always been an entrepreneur because I approach my work from a standpoint that I own this. And I often share with many of my mentees when they talk about, well, this isn't my job. This isn't in my job description, so I'm not really responsible for doing this, but they keep asking me to do this. And I ask them to consider it a part of ascribing to your value. Because if they did not think you could do it, they would not ask you. Well, they don't never ask the other guy. That's because they don't have any confidence in him accomplishing it. And so I consider it investing in your future, investing in your professional walk, in investing in your learning, investing in your skills. So don't get so upset because I'm not getting paid for this right now. You're investing in your future. And I believe me, you will be compensated in some way. And it may not be monetary, but there will be, you will reach a place where you understand your value, and you have to embrace it, you have to own it. And I think that's where we really begin to propel. I'm a follower of Caroline Wanga. She is
Yes.
the CEO of Essence Magazine. And it's just about being authentically you. And that's really not possible if you don't understand your value. So if you begin to really understand what that is and just unapologetic about it, because that's
Yes.
your value is a non-negotiable. And understanding what you bring to, what you bring to the table and just who you are. And that duty and understanding your value, I believe, are, part of the mindset and the skills that are required to be a successful entrepreneur.
I'm very familiar with the work of Caroline Wanga. I remember when she was a VP at Target, and
Yes,
I heard the authentic self speech
yes,
and how, especially for our community, that authenticity helps to support our value. And us being
yes,
our authentic selves is what's going to help us to contribute in ways that we can't if we're trying to be something else. So
yes,
definitely agree. And I think that other, folks who are watching should also tune in to Caroline Wing as well.
yes, yes, yeah. And what I appreciate about it is that, we talk about, there are influencers, there are those of us who have platforms, but what I appreciated about her is that she didn't just talk it, you saw her live out her platform.
Mhm.
And so that's what I look for. You can talk about investment, you can talk about all these wonderful things, or, step me through how to gain, hundreds of thousands of social media, followers, but I don't see you doing that.
Right.
And so, that is really why I have such a level of respect and appreciation for her, because I have seen her walk out her authenticity and the trajectory of her career and those that she has impacted and brought along being unapologetic, has really helped me in my walk from a professional standpoint, because it took me many years, especially being a Black woman in the South, to walk into and embrace that I just could no longer devalue my comfort because of you being uncomfortable.
Right.
I couldn't do it anymore. And once working through that, I always share this, and I say it very emphatically, that you won't go back.
Right.
Once you understand what that is, I mean, you walk in a place of empowerment that you will not go back.
I definitely understand that. I spent 20 years in corporate America, and there were rewards for folks who sort of gave up their authenticity. However, it came at the sacrifice of their happiness, and that was something that I no longer wanted to participate in myself. So I definitely understand when I made the journey myself to U.S. Black Chambers, value just seemed to increase exponentially, and what I'm able to do for Black-owned businesses is way more than I could do when I was locked into something where I couldn't be the fullest expression of myself, if you will.
Yes.
And to care about the issues that impact our community and to be able to do something about it, your hands were tied, so to speak. So I feel like there's tremendous opportunity for those folks who are looking to be entrepreneurs, and as you said earlier, to own something. And so I think that our community can definitely benefit from these words that you're sharing with us on today. Now, just a couple more questions for you, and thank you so much for your time. This one is about some of the challenges that you faced in business and in chamber leadership. I wonder if you can tell us about some of the challenges you faced and then what you've learned from them.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to that word value. One of the issues around the disparities that we see is the value that's ascribed to you, and understanding who really is the beneficiary of the opportunity that we go after. And I'll just use, for example, when we're talking about grant funding and things like that, and you'll find these opportunities for this funding. And then you can check all of the boxes, and for some reason you weren't selected. Your program, there are all these reasons, but it's really more so because of this value that is placed on you that no one has really taken the time to truly assess or evaluate. It is just because of either who you are, where you are, what you look like, your zip code, and sometimes who you're serving. Because what we understand about these dollars is that the beneficiary most often, of course, are those who are generously giving those dollars, but they're looking for as much mileage as they can get out of partnering with you. And if there's this sense of this doesn't quite, they don't quite reach the level of where I think the value should be. And most often it is very unfortunate because those that we serve are not reached because, there is this lack of support, and funding. But what I have found here in Utah is this sense of real and allyship for all. And we work towards, I say this often, when we begin to talk about, DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity is a fact. It's just diverse because we showed up in the space.
Right.
Equity is a choice. We make a decision on whether or not we are going to be equitable. But inclusion is the action.
Mhm.
And I say we have the letters in reverse. We should start with the action. We should start with inclusion. And so when I look at the work of the chamber, it is closing the gaps, getting like-minded, but people who are different in close proximity enough to understand, to hear, to empathize, and that's how we will reach equity. Because as long as you're on the other side of the room, on the other side of the street, on the other side of the tracks, we don't have an opportunity to understand or even hear or even really consider each other for who we are. And I appreciate here in Utah that there is this effort and intentionality around being in the same spaces. And I'll tell you, quite frankly, I have grown to appreciate it, but it's like, where is the space for just the Black people? Because when you are, there is this, as I said, there's this intentionality around inclusion. And we have a long way to go, as I said, but I can work and thrive in an environment like that.
Right.
And so that really drives the work of the chamber for me. But one of my really main focuses, and I appreciate the partnership and the support of the U.S. Black Chamber, because we are really low in number here as a Black community. Utah is overlooked for a lot of opportunities because there's this whole notion that it's not enough of them there.
Right.
And my whole soapbox is, it doesn't matter if it's 2, you support the 2.
That's right.
Right? We'll never get to 10 if you don't support the 2. And so, in partnership with the U.S. Black Chamber and being able to tie our membership into a lot of the programming and opportunities that's presented by the JP Morgan Chase and the American Express, that helps us really strengthen our networks. Because what I'm really looking to do is strengthen our businesses to the point where they understand that, no, you don't have a community to tap into to really generate your business or to sustain your business, because we're not in Atlanta or we're not a DC. And so we don't have a community that will just, enough of a community that will sustain us. But we have to look outward for those opportunities. E-commerce is alive and well. We're working through a project, a pilot project with a partner that understands that and really believes that technology is to addressing the racial wealth gap. And so we are piloting, we will begin in 2023 to pilot a program where the technology will be provided to our businesses free of charge, but with the capacity and the training to really utilize that technology to grow their businesses to a place where they really can compete and sustain themselves by generating, utilizing those technology tools. And so, being able to get the attention of major organizations and corporations to understand here, we're relevant, we're real. And despite the barriers and the obstacles and low in number, we're thriving to some about the fact that if you're a Black business in Utah, you want to be here, worked to sustain and to be here. And so my job is to truly bring value to ensure that they continue to grow, but that they grow of Utah. We are a global economy, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be participating and thinking in that way.
Right. I love that because there's so many lessons from that. And, we think we don't have enough customers. We think we don't have enough people, advocating for us. We think we don't have enough reach or engagement, but you have to start somewhere. And it sounds like, that's the lesson that we learn from that. So I definitely appreciate that. And I just have 2 more questions for you. And we talked earlier about your faith. I wonder if you can tell us how your faith has contributed to where you are today in business and in chamber leadership?
Well, I'll say this again. For me, this is mission and ministry. We talk about the opportunity to come to Utah. Well, I had a thriving business. Within a year, I had taken that revenue to 10x.
Mm-hmm.
Not hurting there. Of course, had some challenges because, Sidni L Shorter, that name kind of doesn't tell you anything about the person itself. If you go to our website, you see diversity. And there were often times that I would show up in spaces with some of my consultants, and my pool is very diverse. And so, the looks and the oohs and ahs when, I was the lady sitting in the back who had acquired the business, and I wasn't male, I wasn't white, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a finance person, and having to explain, well, but you have an accounting and finance firm. And so I would always use the example, I guarantee you the CEO of Ford does not know how to build a car.
Does not.
But he knows how to run a business, right?
Right.
And so, but that has everything to do with my faith and how I walk it out. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that I am serving others. I am here. I'm blessed to be a blessing. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I approach everything I do. But I talk about this opportunity in Utah from this perspective, is that this was not planned. This was very unexpected. But from a spirituality standpoint, I could see how it was being orchestrated. And if I were not obedient, it would not have been an opportunity. So I don't forget that. And so I just believe in, one of the things my mother used to say often is that, I'd rather see a sermon than hear a sermon. Right. And so I just believe in, and by no stretch of the imagination do I always get it right. I do not. Right. But I do believe in failing forward. I believe that there is a solution for every problem. And I also believe that sometimes the harder it is, the better I'm going to be once I get to the other side of that. And I've had some challenges that the only reason why I got to the other side of that was because I had to remove it from me and really stand on my faith. And so I just, that's where I am. I'll be 60 years old in a month. On the 26th of November. And so I have lived through some things. I've lived through being given my expiration date. Mm. And so I don't forget that. What I tell people often is that I don't live there, but I don't have amnesia.
Right.
And so I know that forward is always where I should be focused, and it's not about me. I know how to lead from behind. I've been kind of counseled on my social media presence. It's like, you do so much, you're doing so much, you should have yourself out there, you should let people know what you're doing. But, I believe it's in the results for the businesses that we serve.
Yes.
Because it's not about me, it's really about the work. And if I'm doing the work, the results will show in the businesses here and our partners here in Utah and abroad. And right. So that's one of my weaknesses. That's one of my challenges. And, we have this conversation often, and I say, oh, I'll do better. Well, you need to post something. Oh yeah, that part, so it's really not about, promoting me. Right. Now, if you want me to talk about some of our businesses and some of our partners, you got it.
Right.
Yeah.
There used to be the saying, the proof is in the pudding.
That's right. That's right.
I think what you're describing is, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, there's no need for me to post about it. It's going to show up in the numbers and the outcomes.
That's right.
And that's a good way to work is to make sure that you're not focused on, having to show your good works, but then letting your good works kind of speak for themselves. So
That's right.
wow, thank you so much for sharing that, and the piece about being obedient to your calling. So I really do appreciate that. So
Thank you.
we've come to the end of this Fridays with Phil with Dr. Shorter. I really do appreciate you for being here, for sharing your time, sharing your wisdom, and sharing a little bit about your journey with our audience. And on behalf of our president, Ron Busby, our board, and our staff, I want to thank you, and I want to thank our audience for watching. And we look forward to seeing more from Dr. Shorter, the Utah Black Chamber of Commerce, as well as hearing more about your journey as well in the future. So we thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Phil. Heart of gratitude for this opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, and happy Friday.